I'm Tom Riordan. I'm the Chief Executive of Leeds City Council. So we have 15,000 staff. We serve 812,000 people, and we do lots of different things in Leeds, from collecting the bins, fixing the potholes, not as much as we would like to social care, homelessness, the planning system, lots of things. So I think the type of leader I am is really a team player. Some would say collaborative. And that comes back to, I think, I love team sports. I've played football all my life, not very well. I'm a really strong believer in not one individual being the answer to something. I think we have this sort of quite a negative history of a single person having all the answers and being accountable for everything. Often a white man, I've got to say, and a fairly privileged white man as well. And so I've always tried to, the way I describe it is that when you look at an object, if you only see it from one side, you often don't get the full picture. So I really love working in teams, recognizing that to get anything done these days, given the complexity of the world, so whether it's inequality, whether it's climate change, productivity, growth, obesity, all these big, wicked issues require not a single individual or organisation, but a collective effort, usually in a place. So mental health is really, really important to me, mainly for very personal reasons, because my mum is bipolar. My mum's still alive, she's in her 80s. From the age of 17, she's taken about 16 pills a day. And through her life, she's been well at times and poorly at times, which is the nature of the illness. So growing up, we were very used to, in a single day, everything would be all right, to we're in complete crisis. Who's going to make the tea? Who's going to sort of look after us this evening? And so, yeah, I've sort of lived in that household where crisis is a real thing. Very loving household as well. My dad became an alcoholic and became depressed as well at the same time. So me and my brother ended up in care 3 or 4 times before I sort of knew what was happening. So it was when I was a toddler. Then my gran gave up her job to become, and we all moved in with her, and that sort of saved us really. So a very loving family, but one that was very aware and attuned to mental illness, mental health. And so when I've got into jobs that have been relevant to mental health, I don't really need to say anymore that it's in my heart, not just my head. So I think the main thing I bring is empathy, because so one of the things that was very vivid from my childhood was that when my mum had been, what would tend to happen is that she'd be well for a period and then she'd start getting poorly, and we'd have a sort of spiral that was either a depression spiral or a higher one, heightened one. And when that happened, she ended up being sectioned and then went into hospital, and then she'd get better and come out. But when she'd come out, she'd be really, really self-conscious. She wouldn't want to go into town because she thought everyone was talking about her and judging her from what had happened before. So I have sort of understood stigma very sort of keenly growing up and in my life. But you do have power over certain things. You can put your name and your sort of, your sponsorship almost behind certain issues. And I chose to do that for mental health and equality because of that background that I had. understood stigma, and I understood, the judgment that people make of people with mental illness growing up. But I didn't fully understand the combination of that with racism until I got into my job that I'm in at the moment. I came into Leeds because it had a history of, a really proud history of standing up for equality, and it's no accident Nelson Mandela came to Leeds because it was the heart of the anti-apartheid movement in the 70s in the north. I really associated with that, and it was one of the things that I was very keen to do something about and to help. I'd been in the role for over a decade when Black Lives Matter happened, and I started hearing the lived experience of some of my staff, and I was completely bereft. It's the biggest failure of my career that I was overseeing an organisation where that could happen, and was happening. And when I heard the research about the number of people who were sectioned who were black, disproportionately, it sort of, the penny dropped. So, I was, when I heard about this project and the work that we could do with the NHS to try and put that right, I was massively behind it. There's lots of things that we had to do following Black Lives Matter within the organisation. So we've given mandatory training. I don't like doing mandatory anything in an organisation, especially in Yorkshire. People don't like being told what to do, but we had to do it with this. So we did mandatory training for 2,000 managers. We've changed our recruitment practices. We've changed our grievance procedures. We've listened much more and responded much more to our staff networks of particularly black and Asian staff who've told us that we weren't doing well enough. And we're getting better. Got better representation at a senior level. We've got better experience of people. We've done a staff survey that's shown that when people are asked the question, does your manager take inclusion seriously? 89% said yes. So we're making a difference, but always so much more to do. Again, going back to growing up, I saw with my mum's diagnoses that she wouldn't be taken seriously when she had a physical problem because she was mentally ill. And so I think that there has been a welcome slight reversal more recently of more resources going into mental health, but it's still the tip of the iceberg. And I think coming out of the pandemic, we have such a massively enhanced cohort of people who now have never had a problem with mental health in their lives, but now do have, or their kids have, or their friends have, that I think it's much more pervasive to society than it used to be. So unless we mainstream it and mainstream support, that when you're getting support for, physical illness, people talk to you about your mental health, when we realise that stress is the highest reason for workplace absence now, it's a direct economic effect on the country, on productivity. So we've got to, I think about it in terms of severe mental illness and making sure that people have that, support for acuity that is really needed. But equally, I think there's a whole set of people, huge amount of people now who are in that space where, they've been surprised and worried and anxious about getting mental health problems. And we need to convince them and show them that they can get better. And that we need to give them the ability to do that and the support to do that. And I think it will be a massive invest to save for the country if we were able to do that. So I'll do what I can within Leeds to make that happen in my last few months here in the job. And I'd love to get a job next where I will be able to have an even bigger impact on that issue. So I think the issue of racism and racial justice and the wider link to inclusion has been such a contested area politically in the last few years. I believe much to the detriment of the country. I think people have almost been, and it's connected to the national media as well, I would say, where people are almost forced into trenches against one another. Whereas in Leeds, I think what we've managed to do is to get across to people that your starting point is that it's about everyone as an individual. So inclusion is not, your starting point for inclusion is about everybody. And then once you've accepted that's your goal, for everybody to achieve their potential, you've got to then accept that certain people don't, and there's a reason why they don't. And that's where the protected characteristics come in. And that's where, the fact that you do have to do a bit more to support certain cohorts of people because the current system just doesn't work for them comes in. And I think we've done it that way round, and it's helped because, and that's allowed us to be much more upfront about zero tolerance towards racism. I think, again, the lived experience, I would recommend to anybody who's struggling with these issues in a leadership position to look at lived experience, because you can't argue with lived experience. It's what people are actually, experiencing, quite literally. You can look at the numbers, and the numbers tell a certain story, but then you've got to listen to people and use that and try and improve. So I think for us, I think it's been easier for me to be able to admit where we're wrong, where we've not been good enough. I think it's been easier as a result to make the changes that we needed to make and move this issue from what some might have seen as a bit not peripheral, but to the side of what we're trying to do, instead to the centre of what we're trying to do. And that is not to create a hierarchy of injustice in our organisation. It's that we recognise that there are lots of issues we've got to get better at, and this is one of the main ones. I mean, I absolutely love Leeds. I love the city. I love the council. I work with the best people in and outside the council. I will miss Leeds so much. And the thing I love most about Leeds is the diversity of its people and the fact that you can, we're in Chapeltown. I remember having a meeting in Chapeltown with a bunch of 14, 15-year-olds just after we built the arena. And one of them said to me, "What's that spaceship type building in the city centre?" And that's less than a mile away from here. And, I've always tried to get out and listen to people and meet people. And I've played dominoes with the community in Leeds. I've played football. I've done the job as well. And I will take with me that sort of that compassion and that sense of community, that fierce sense of community that people have in Leeds, but also that team spirit as well, and the ambition to get things right. And I do think we're a part of the world where, I want to move to a post-woke period. The word itself and the division it creates, where people can just actually address these issues together and stop fighting about, semantics, and accept that there are problems that we've got to put right. So I want to take that, the learning that I've got from these brilliant people that I work with, brilliant communities that I've worked with, and take it to a national stage and change the system to one where people actually can be themselves and don't have to, support one sports team to be patriotic, or feel that they've got to speak in a certain way to get on, or can't have their hair in a certain way if they go to a certain part of the country, or, we've got to break through this, and we've got to be a bit more confident, I think, in leadership positions to call out people who are just trying to make trouble and get people into that centred ground. My daughter is someone who challenges me the most. She's doing I think I'm a feminist. She is a arch feminist. And so she's always challenging me. And what I say to her sometimes is, I think when you're trying to address an issue like racial injustice or discrimination to women, misogyny, I see two sets of allies. There's one set of allies who are the activists and who are the ones with the lived experience that can absolutely tell you how it is. And they have such an important and legitimate role. I'll never be an activist. But what I can do is, I'm in the other group, which is that group in the middle, who can help influence that wider and wider and wider group who actually accept that things need to change. And I think together, those two lots of people, the activists and the allies, are who we've got to work together on and make sure that we can change the country for the better, not just places like Leeds. So I think to be successful just in what I've tried to do in Leeds with others is that there are two things for me. One is having a clear ambition that people can get behind and that it's authentic to the place. And for us, that's, about Leeds being a compassionate city with a strong economy working towards net zero. That sort of is our little strap line if you had to come up with it. But the other bit that's sort of more important in a way is how you work together. And we call that Team Leeds. And it's really about values and behaviours. And you've got to have inclusion and, that sort of joint approach at the heart of what you do. You've got to respect people. So just because you've got a statutory responsibility for something, it doesn't mean that you're more important than someone who hasn't. So, having the statutory agencies alongside the non-statutory, the third sector particularly, the people with lived experience, is really, really important. And I think at any team, if you had all the same sort of player, then you'd lose. But when you need difference in a good team. So I think respecting and valuing each other's different positions and experiences and behaviours, accepting that we've always got to sort of make a decision and move forward. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But the important thing is that we're going to stay together and work through things together is, for me, what's really, really important.